Should you buy a home in Kansas City now, or should you wait until 2025 or 2026? This is hands down the most asked question right now, and for really good reason. Rates are probably going to keep dropping, prices are probably going to go up, and well, of course, we've got an election which is just weeks and weeks away. So we're going to break it all down in this video. Before we get started with the first part, gotta issue a disclaimer that your specific situation matters far more than anything we're about to talk about. Nobody's got a crystal ball, and of course, timing is never perfect. And with that said, I do want to give you a couple of things to think about and ideally put you in the best position possible for when your time to buy a home in Kansas City does come around. Now, without further ado, we're going to break this down into two separate parts. So the first half of the video will be the advantages of buying now. The second half of the video will be the advantages of waiting to buy. So first advantage of buying a home right now is that the prices are going to keep going up. If you've ever heard that investment advice, it says the best time to invest was yesterday, the next best time is today. The same thing seems to be true of real estate, especially right now in Kansas City. We've got a housing shortage, we've got sky high demand, and because of that, home prices are likely to keep escalating. Now, I know there's a group of people out there, and I would like to see this happen as well, I just think it's unlikely, that wants to see home prices decrease. And I completely get it. It just seems, based on what's going on with the market, it seems like that's very unlikely to happen, barring some unforeseen event or black swan event that really takes down the entire economy. And even then, it's questionable how much home prices would come down. So there is a cost to waiting to buy. This article from Bankrate breaks down why it's unlikely to see home prices decrease anytime soon. It says, is the housing market going to crash? Here's what the experts are saying. And if we scroll all the way to the bottom, they outline 5 reasons why there's likely to not be a housing market crash. The first one is the housing shortage. We've got way too much demand compared to the supply. Second is you've got builders who are not building as many homes on a yearly basis as we really need. We're about 500,000 homes short, depending on the numbers you look at. Number 3 is demographic trends. We've got a lot of young millennials who are entering their peak home buying years. This is more of a structural one, which pushes home values up because it's far more important than any small change day to day, week to week, year to year when it comes to something like mortgage rates. This is generational demand for housing. You've got number 4, which says lending standards remain strict. We don't have any of the liar loans that you would have seen in 2007, 2008, where you could qualify at a promotional interest rate. And then of course that interest rate jumps up over time and people have to sell the home. Number 5 is that foreclosure activity is muted. People are sitting on a lot of equity, especially if they bought around 2019, 2020. And as a result, even if we saw the economy start to slide a little bit, it's very unlikely we would see home prices decrease. But the opposite is true. As the longer you wait to buy a home, likely the higher prices are going to get. The real question is how much higher can those home prices get? And that brings us to advantage number 2 of buying a home right now, which is zig while everyone else zags. I'm a firm believer in trying to sidestep as much competition as possible. If you're buying a home, the last thing that we want to do is put you in a situation where you're competing with other home buyers who are willing to pay more, willing to waive an inspection, appraisal, etc. And ultimately it just drives up the price or takes the terms that might be favorable and drives them right down into the ground. So that's part of this is seasonality. We have less people buying and selling homes right now. The other part of this is we're in the middle of an election cycle and we've got a lot of political polarization. There are a lot of people who might be on the sidelines kind of waiting to see what happens, and they don't want to do anything now because there's a lot of uncertainty. And according to this article from Riz Media, it says, do presidential elections impact the housing market? I'm going to flip to an ad-free version of this article so it's easier to read and easier to follow. They do point this out. They say there's a widely accepted theory that people hold back on buying a home leading up to the presidential election. However, the data reveals no evidence of a slowdown in market activity during election years. It says home sales almost always decline seasonally between October and November, which I think would be maybe an advantage to buying right now. There's less competition. It goes on to say that mortgage rates are far more important than elections. However, it does concede there are ways in which this election could be different. High-income homebuyers might be more likely to take a cautious approach. They say it's also possible that some people are worried about potential chaos post-election. Maybe it sounds like the election is going to be a close race. And if that's true, no matter who wins, if it is a close race, we're going to see some turbulence, we're going to see some uncertainty, and the market is probably not going to react very favorable unless it's just like a blowout election, which seems unlikely. So long story short, the second advantage, zig while everybody else zags, it has everything to do with competition. There are a lot of people on the sidelines who aren't going to buy buy just because of seasonality, then you've got a whole other group of people who are probably on the sidelines not wanting to buy a home just because of election uncertainty. And that leads us into part number 3. It's very similar, but it's not identical. Mortgage rates are expected to decrease. And what that means for home buyers is often really good news. We'll talk about it in part number 2 of the video, which is that your buying power increases, right? The monthly payment goes down, the amount of home that you can afford goes up. And while that's normally good news, what's going to happen eventually, because we've seen it the last couple of years, once those rates drop, a lot of people jump back into the market. Those home prices start increasing like crazy and competition goes through the roof, which results in bidding wars. Even that frenzy we had a couple years ago, we still kind of see some aspects of this where people waive inspections, they waive appraisals, and all sorts of things that you really don't want to deal with or go up against when you are in the market to buy a home. How low will mortgage rates go? And we're going to try to answer that right now. This article is from the Motley Fool. It says, here's what the average 30-year mortgage rate will be in 2025. And of course, I've got an ad-free version of this article that I want to show you. If we scroll down just a little bit, it says the Fed is expected to gradually cut rates between now and the end of 2025. It says in January 2025, I would expect the average 30-year mortgage rate to be around 6%, not too far below where it is right now. It's around 6.3%, just for context today. By December 2025, so a little over a year from now, I expect the average 30-year mortgage rate to fall to approximately 5.1%, which could make a big difference in the cost of home ownership. And I will certainly talk about how big of a difference when it comes to the second part of the video, the advantages of waiting until mortgage rates drops. But this is certainly one that I consider. And if you plan on buying a home in cash, or you have a significant amount of cash you plan on putting down towards the purchase of that home, I'd certainly do it now, because the lower those mortgage rates go, the higher the competition gets and the less valuable that cash offer appears, just because you've got so many other people out there in the market with high buying power because those interest rates are just a little lower. Now, as you can probably tell from those last 2 advantages of buying now instead of waiting, one of my big kind of perspectives, philosophies when it comes to buying real estate or really anything is we want to avoid as much competition as possible, because competition, competing with other home buyers, either drives the price up, the terms down, or both. And this is what we do for all of our clients. So if you have any questions about what we cover in this video, or you want to put together a plan to shield yourself from competition, give yourself more leverage, and negotiate a better deal, all of my contact information is on the screen. Feel free to give me a phone call, text message, email. I'd absolutely love to set you up for success. We're going to move on to the second part of the video. I know the elephant in the room is kind of, you're a licensed real estate agent and you're telling people now's a great time to buy a home. Well, there's also a flip side of that, and we've got to address that as well. So part number 2 of the video, why it makes more sense to wait to buy a home versus buying one right now. Advantage number 1 of waiting to buy a home is mortgage rates. I know we covered this in the previous section, but there are 2 ways to look at it. Mortgage rates decreasing, even though there might be more competition for those homes, even though the prices might go up a little bit, I'd rather keep that interest rate lower so my monthly payment can be lower as well. We'll break down the actual impact of that, but I do want to give you the scenario. This was from the Motley Fool article that looked kind of like this. It had 2 predictions. One was January 2025, so the end of 24, says rates will be around 6%, which is a whole lot better than what they've been over the past few months. I think in March, April, May, they hit somewhere around 7.3%. So this is certainly an improvement. Today, they're around 6.3%. So this is a not too far off and very likely to happen. So the second prediction is December 2025. So over a year and a few months from now, it says the rate will be somewhere around a 5.1%, which would be a big difference in the cost of home ownership. The real question is how much of a difference, and I've run the numbers for us. So if we assume you're purchasing a home around $500,000, 20% down payment, today's interest rate of around 6.3, 6.4%, your monthly payment would be around $31.69 a month. And of course, that includes property taxes, insurance, HOA, other things like that. But those numbers are the exact same for the lower mortgage rate, which is calculated at that 5.1% number. It says your monthly payment would be around $28.39 compared to that $31.69, which would be over $300 a month in savings. And over the course of 1 year, it would be about $3,600 a year. So again, back to the whole competition deal that we covered in the first part of the video, there's a clear argument here that says, you know what, I might face more competition. I'm perfectly fine with that, because even if I pay $10,000 more more for a property, I'll recoup that investment over just 3 years of living in the property. If I plan to live there for 10, I'm at least saving about $20,000 just in the interim for having that lower mortgage payment. A win's a win. I'd rather wait for mortgage rates to drop, and that would be the advantage to waiting. And that brings us into number 2. It's the election. There's going to be some short-term uncertainty as well as some long-term uncertainty. If you wait until the election's over, you'll have some idea of the direction the country might be headed, especially when it comes to housing policy. Now, we're not going to get into a whole lot of the politics specific stuff. If you do have any specific concerns, if you want to talk about it, how it impacts your home search, feel free to reach out to me. I'm happy to do that on a one-to-one basis, but I'm not going anywhere near that in this specific video. So I think there are 2 reasons why you'd want to wait until after the election. The first one would be short-term uncertainty. Sounds like it's going to be a close race. If it is a close race, given all the political polarization that's happening right now, both sides are kind of dug into their candidate. If it is close by any means, doesn't matter who wins, there's going to be some turbulence, whether it's the stock market, whether you see interest rates kind of going up and down, not necessarily the Fed cutting or choosing to pause the cuts on interest rates, just how the markets react to all of that. That could be one reason, right? So kind of wait until that's all over, wait till everything settles down, and then buy a home. Completely understand that. I think the second advantage to waiting until after the election is, again, both, if your candidate wins, you're probably going to feel a little bit more confident, comfortable with the economy, and there can be a certain advantage to that. Now, the separate part of this, I do want to add a caveat, which is both candidates have released their housing policies. I think they're both vague on both sides, and unfortunately, a lot of those policies are going to have to get through Congress. They have to be implemented, the details have to be ironed out, and that likely means for most of those policy positions that have been discussed, most of them will likely not materialize, and if they do, it'll be years and years and years down the road. Now, the third and final advantage to waiting to buy a home is the lock-in effect. This has been discussed by all the housing market experts, lenders, everybody in between. It's essentially the idea that because a lot of people purchased their homes between 2019, 2020, when rates are very low, they're essentially locked into their current house, meaning even though they would want to sell their home and buy a different one, they feel that mortgage rates are just still too high for them to actually pull the trigger and do it, and they'd want to see rates come down below the magic threshold of somewhere around 5% according to most experts. So the long story short, the reason this is an advantage to waiting to buy a home is there might be more options on the market. Now, of course, there might be more competition, but at that point, you've kind of already prepared for it because you've chosen to wait. You know that mortgage rates are going to drop, and as a result of that, there are going to be more people, more buying power in the market, but still, there's something to be said about having more options to choose from, especially if you're looking for a very specific neighborhood, a very specific type of home. That could be a major advantage to waiting, is you're just going to have more inventory on the market. Even though there's more competition, you'd much rather have more options to choose from than the kind of limited options we have right now. Now, that's all I've got for this video. I can't guarantee that the predictions we covered come true, but what I can guarantee is that when they do, when we do find out what happens, the first place you'll be able to hear about it is right here on the channel. So make sure you subscribe to see those updates when they come out. If you enjoyed this one, hit the like button down below. If you have any questions about buying, building, selling a home right here in Kansas City, whether it's in the next couple months or years down the road, I'd absolutely love the opportunity to earn your business and really set you up for success. So feel free to give me a phone call, text message, email anytime. You can make everything we talked about in this video specific to you, really game plan and figure out how we can put you in a position, shield you from some competition, and really help you get a great price on your home. With that being said, before you go, click either here to see the video YouTube thinks you'd enjoy the most, or click right here to see a whole playlist full of different videos about new construction homes in Kansas City. So click right here or here, and I will see you on the other side.